Eliezer asked me to give the class, so I said yes, and then I had to think, so which Torah portion is it going to be? And if there's a Torah portion that's, to use a very bad word, there's a Torah portion that's boring, it's this week's Torah portion. Why do I say it's boring? Because everything that's in this week's Torah portion is a direct repeat, except for the first couple lines, is a direct repeat from something that we read 3-4 weeks ago about building of the Mishkan, building the tabernacle, building the Mishkan inside the desert. So it's a repeat. So this week I got a question from someone. He wanted to know, since it's a repeat, do I remember all the numbers from last time when we read it, how big it is and how small it is? It's a very boring Torah portion. So I was thinking to myself, what am I going to do? But then I looked at the calendar and I realized that today, the Thursday, the 27th day of Adar, is an extremely sad day on the calendar. In 1992, it was also a leap year, so it was Adar 1. On the 27th day of Adar, it was a Monday, not a Thursday, it was a Monday. And at that time, the Rebbe had a tradition that every Monday and every Thursday, he would go from Crown Heights, and he would get in his car at about, depending on the day, I think in those days it was probably about 1:30, after he davened Mincha, and he would travel to the gravesite of his father-in-law, to the oil, and he would pray there for a few hours, and then he would come back. And on this particular day, I don't remember I believe it was on his way in, he suffered a terrible stroke, and we were never able to hear Rebbe's voice again. And 2 years later, on exactly the same day, he suffered a second stroke, and ultimately, a couple of months later, it was the third day of Tammuz, the day of his passing. So the beginning of the time when we stopped being able to hear things from the Rebbe, the beginning of the time when we stopped being able to receive dollars and receive blessings in a clear and an open way. Blessings we could still receive, and Rebbe's Torah, we all of us still have much that we could master and learn. But new Torah and receiving blessings in a very revealed way, where you come and ask for a blessing and hear from the Rebbe's mouth a blessing, that stopped on the 27th day of Adar, number 1, in the year 1992, which would have been, this year would be 32 years today, the 27th day of Adar. So then I was thinking, I can't not bring this up. But what am I going to do? What am I going to say? That we should all mourn, we should all cry, what should we do? So we have I saw today actually, well, first let me tell you what's traditional. The last Chassidic discourse that the Rebbe gave out about 2 weeks before. The Rebbe used to give out a Chassidic discourse on Mamer, which is different than a Sikha, and I'll explain in a moment what those two things are. And the Rebbe gave out one about 2 weeks before. And I saw today actually a footnote in a somewhere, and it says that in 1950, right after his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, passed away, the Rebbe wrote about a Chassidic discourse that his father-in-law gave out for the 19th day of Kislev, so roughly about 2.5 months before he passed away. And the Rebbe said, this is the last Chassidic discourse 2 months before he passed away. This is the last Chassidic discourse that we have from him, so this is what we should live with. So therefore I decided that it would be appropriate I cannot teach you the whole Mamer for multiple reasons, but mostly because it's an extremely long Chassidic discourse. And it would take us 3, 4, 5 hours to go through it, and although I might enjoy it, I'm not sure how many other people would. So I'm going to try to explain some of the highlights of the Mamer, some of the highlights of the Chassidic discourse. And if you have any questions, I could try to answer them afterwards. But mostly understand that we are missing details. We're absolutely missing details which may answer your questions. But in the understanding the general idea is what we're trying to do over here. We're not trying to get every detail worked out, but the general concepts. But first, let me explain the difference between a Chassidic discourse and a Sikha, and a talk. And I'll demonstrate it with a story, and then I'll try to explain it to the best of my ability. In 1977, on Simchas Torah, the Rebbe suffered a heart attack in the middle of Hakafos. While they were dancing with the Torah, the Rebbe suffered from a heart attack. It was a very, very scary time. In those days, in the 70s, and I know this because my grandfather, of blessed memory, he also had a heart attack in the 70s. I think in 75 he had a heart attack. And he told me, what did they do in the 70s when you had a heart attack? This is what he told me. He told me in the 70s, they told you should go rest and pray to God that you survive. That's what they did for heart attacks in the 70s. So when the Rebbe has a heart attack in 1977, you can imagine it's a very scary time for the thousands of Hasidim, the thousands of people who are sitting in the synagogue watching the Rebbe, literally watching with their eyes in front of them during the dancing with the Torah as the Rebbe is suffering a heart attack. And without going into the whole story of what happened, 2 weeks later, 2 weeks later, maybe even the next week, the Rebbe says he wants to talk to the Hasidim. He wants to speak. He wants to have a Hasidic gathering on Shabbos, but he can't do anything on Shabbos. So they change it to Saturday night. And the Rebbe would sit in his room with a microphone. And the microphone would be, the speaker's system was downstairs in 770. And the Rebbe would talk. And while the Rebbe was talking, the Rebbe was hooked up to machinery to watch his heart. Because if you've ever learned anything, if you've ever learned anything in general, but if you ever learned any Torah, you know that when you get involved in the learning, your heart starts beating faster, you get excited, and the doctors were very nervous what was going to happen. So they hooked him onto monitors, and they stood in the next room watching the monitors, and the Rebbe was talking. And the Rebbe spoke the first week for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, and the next week he spoke for an hour, and eventually it was... Anyway, the first time that the Rebbe does this, they're watching the monitors, and all of a sudden, the heart monitor goes dead. There's no heartbeat. You can imagine doctors sitting in the next room and they see a heart monitor go dead after a man who just had a heart attack. They go running into the Rebbe's office, and the Rebbe is sitting calmly, peacefully, and the Rebbe is talking. What is going on? The Rebbe is saying a maimor. The Rebbe is saying a maimor. The Rebbe spoke before and after, nothing. But here the Rebbe is saying a maimor. Exactly what it means, I'm going to try my best to explain, but understand that it's a holy concept, a concept that's really above any of our human understanding. But the idea and simple is, when the Rebbe teaches Torah, the Rebbe is a teacher who knows a lot of Torah and has godly wisdom, not just wisdom of human, but wisdom of God, and he teaches the way the Torah is supposed to be taught. He learned it the way it's supposed to be learned, and he taught it the way it's supposed to be taught. But it's intellectual that he's teaching us. When the Rebbe says a maimor, when the Rebbe says a Chassidic discourse, it has nothing to do with him. It's a message from God that his mouth is a vessel to transport to us. But he's not involved. The Rebbe himself is just a utensil to allow the message of God to come out to the many people. In fact, I'll tell you 2 quick stories and then I'll get to the maimor that we want to talk about. By the 5th Chabad Rebbe, he used to call them in afterwards, and even by the Rebbe sometimes, he used to call them in, and he used to say, "No, could you repeat for me the maimor?" And sometimes he would ask, "I really said that? I really said that?" Sometimes, by the 2nd Chabad Rebbe, he once said a Chassidic discourse, and his son was arguing with another person, what did the father mean by the Chassidic discourse? And this other big chassid who was a very, very great chassid, his name was Rabbi Paritcher, he said, even if you ask your father and he disagrees with me, I'm still right. He said the maimor. He said when he was saying it, he was saying a word from God, and now it's just how he understands it. And when he comprehends it, I say I understood differently. Okay, we're not in that level, but so this is a Chassidic maimor, Chassidic discourse, and I'm gonna be transparent. I learned this maimor many, many, many times in my life, but like 2 weeks ago, my wife teaches in school every week, once a week. 2 weeks ago, she said, I really want to teach this maimor. So we went together and we found a teacher who's teaching. His name is Rabbi Patil. And we listened to him teach the maimor. We listened, it's 6 classes, 6 hours. And we listened, she's holding only the 3rd class. I listened to the all 6 hours. And he transformed my understanding of the maimor. Entirely transformed the way I understand this maimor. He totally turned it over. And that's what I want to share with you today. What it is. But before I go into the actual maimor, the Chassidic discourse, I want to give one drop of background so that you can understand and appreciate where the maimor is coming from and where the maimor is trying to go. In 1927, the previous Rebbe, the 6th Chabad Rebbe, the Rebbe's father-in-law, was very, very active in fighting communism. And by fighting communism, I mean he was sending people...
Who was that?
The previous Chabad Rebbe, the 6th Chabad Rebbe. What do I mean by actively fighting communism? I mean that he was opening up schools, building mikvahs, opening up synagogues, wherever it was, to the extent that it was known if a guy was arrested on Monday, by Wednesday morning there was a new person there ready to take over whatever he was doing. And for this, he was considered an enemy of the state, to which he was eventually arrested for, and to which he was put into prison for. He was sentenced to death, but that was changed to put into prison. And eventually he was told, you know what? We're not going to kill you. We're not going to keep you in prison. We're just going to throw you out of the country. Get out of Russia. Where should you go? Go to Poland. And it was Purim right before he got arrested. So it was about 3 months before he got arrested. And he spoke by the Chassidic gathering for Purim. And he spoke about how we have to risk our lives for Judaism. And he said, he wasn't bashful about what was going on. He was very clear. He said, sitting in this room right now are people from the NKVD. The people sitting over here from the prior to the KGB was the NKVD. The people sitting here in this room who are going to listen to what I'm saying now, and they're going to hold it against me that I'm going against the government. Nevertheless, I'm telling you, you have to fight. And this was going on for hours. And then in the middle, he said a Chassidic discourse. And the words, that the Jewish people accepted, they accepted what they had started to do. And in that Chassidic discourse, what does he talk about? He talks about how a Jewish person has to be willing and ready to give up his life for Judaism. In 1981, on Shabbos Parshas Tetzave, the Rebbe says a Chassidic discourse based on this Chassidic discourse. And in the Rebbe's fashion, the Rebbe takes his father-in-law's Chassidic discourse, and the Rebbe is going to dissect it, is going to try to understand the order that he said it, why did he say each paragraph before and after, what did he mean when he added this, and all of that. And we're not going to get into any of that because, like I said, that's beyond the scope of the 45 minutes that I have with you guys. But instead, I want to give you the general theme of the Mamer. And the point of the Mamer is going to be to explain to us what, and this ties into, and this is why I chose this specific Mamer, besides that it was the last one, is because, like I said, today is the 27th day of Adar, the day that Rebbe had his stroke. And this Mamer is going to be, the definition, is going to try to define for us what is the meaning when you hear a Chabad, Chassid, a Shliach, the Rabbi get up and say, the Rebbe. What is the definition of that word, Rebbe? What is the definition? How do we define? What's his job? What is his purpose? Why do we need him? Why do we have him? What do I need him for? What is he here to give me? What am I here to take from him? What is that Rebbe? What is this? What does it have to do with me in my life? This is what the Chassidic discourse is going to come to try to explain to us. So the Mamer is based on the verse V'ata Tetzave b'nei Yisrael, which is not this week's Torah portion, a few weeks ago. V'ata Tetzave b'nei Yisrael, and you should command the Jewish people. You
said you will explain the difference between the Maimor.
Right, that's why and the Sikha, right. So that was when I was explaining to you the difference when the Rebbe was a Sikha was when the Rebbe would teach you Torah. So the Rebbe had a godly wisdom, not just human wisdom, but godly wisdom, and he learned Torah, which is a godly thing, and he explained it to us. While the Maimor was where the Rebbe would just channel what God's message was to us. So like his heart was blank, and afterward they would be able to discuss with him. Okay. They would be able, why? Because it wasn't him. It was a message from God. It was a pipeline. And in the words of the Talmud, are Shechina medaberet b'tech grina, that the word of God spoke through his throat, but not that he was actually speaking. V'ata Tetzave b'nei Yisrael. You should do, this is few weeks ago's Torah portion, 2 weeks ago, and it says like this: V'ata Tetzave b'nei Yisrael. God is telling the Jewish people. God is telling Moses, you should command the Jewish people. V'yikchu elecha shemen zayzach, and they should bring to you oil. Kasis lamar, it should be crushed oil. Why do you need it? In order to light up the menorah. Lahalis netamed, in order to light up the menorah. And everybody asks many questions on this verse, but most importantly, this verse and this entire section of the Torah portion is very unnecessary, because this entire thing is repeated more accurately and better well said later on in the Torah. And so therefore, not only that, but this, in Rashi's commentary himself, Rashi says this is kind of a story to tell us what we're going to do, but the laws are all later on. So in Chassidus, they're very bothered. What is the purpose of this verse? Why do we have this verse? And the Rebbe is going to explain in the Mamer, the Rebbe is going to explain that this verse is here to describe and define to Moshe what his purpose is. And that's why it says, V'ata Tetzave, and you, God is talking to Moses, and you will command, and you will. And he's telling him what he's going to do. Before we get into explaining the verse, I want to give 2 introductions. Both of them, the Rebbe speaks about in the Mamer. Both of them come from within the Mamer, but Yisrael is going to throw eggs at me because I'm going to say the maimor in a total different order than the maimor says it itself. But that's because I'm trying to, like I said, I'm not teaching the whole maimor. I'm just trying to bring out the point of the maimor and some of the messages that we could take. So we're going to kind of mix it up a little bit in order to get the points to help us understand the best. Every single Jew, says the Rebbe, every single Jew, me, you, and everybody you know, no matter how religious and no matter how irreligious they are, has by birth, whether we want it, whether we don't want it, we have belief in God. Why do we have this belief in God? Because Abraham, our forefather, risked his life for God, and he said, therefore God said, I'm going to give a blessing to all your children, that they're all going to have a soul, we're all going to have a connection to God. Emunah comes from the expression, it's something which is certain, and it also is something which we all have, right? That's what emunah is. We believe in God. What is emunah? What's the definition of the word emunah? Defines emunah is that I have a certain certainty, and I'm positive about something that I cannot comprehend. Something that I can't comprehend, you have no permission to believe. You have no permission to believe in something that you can understand. Right? The famous joke.
You have no permission?
You have no permission. If you can understand something, you have no permission to believe it. You have to go and understand it. What's the difference between an atheist and an agnostic? An agnostic
knows.
An atheist chooses not to believe what the agnostic knows not to be true. Yeah, right?
That's good.
What does it mean to believe? If you can understand it, and you say, oh, I believe this. Right? If someone would come to you and tell you, do you believe that this building is that the planes fly? If you say you believe planes fly, you're not a believer. You're an idiot.
Yeah.
You don't believe it. Look outside and go, and you can understand. You could see it. You could know it. If you believe that if you mix yellow and blue, you're going to get whatever color, green, you're an idiot. Go and understand. It's something you could go and learn the physics. You could say, I'm not interested in learning why it is, but that's the reality. That's fine. But to use the word belief for something which you can understand makes you an idiot, not a believer. A Jew, right? We have things that we understand and we know, and things that we believe. What do we believe? We believe what we can't understand. Now I want to clarify. What I am allowed to believe and what you are allowed to believe might be different. Because I might know more than you. I might be smarter than you. And so therefore, I have to work harder to understand that which I can understand. Nobody's saying that if you're not a smart person, you're not allowed to believe simple stuff. If you're not a smart person, you're allowed to believe simple stuff. But everybody has to be honest with themselves. What can I understand? And you're obligated to try to understand it. Where does belief come from? Why do we believe things? So here in the Mamer tells us that there's two fashions of belief. Before we get to the two fashions of belief, just a quick note, and please don't believe me, but trust me what I'm saying now, because it's another very long, complicated subject. But in short, the soul of a Jew is divided into 5 parts. The 3 lower parts come into our body, and it gives us the ability to think and understand and relate to God in a very, with emotionally and intellectually. And then we have 2 other parts of our soul, which do not actually come into the body. One of them is called Chaya, and one of them is called Yechida. So the Rebbe says like this. The Rebbe says, that it says in the Talmud, that a person goes, a thief, goes to steal, and as he's about to break into the house, what does he say? God, please don't let me get caught.
Don't let me get caught.
Yeah, what's a thief praying to God?
Yeah.
If you're about to steal, what are you praying to God?
Yeah.
Says the Rebbe, that's because his belief in God comes from where? Comes from a place which is higher than his understanding, and it's not part of his intellect. It's not part of who he is. It comes from a part of his soul that hovers above him. And in the words of the Zohar, it's called Mazlayu Chazi. His mazel saw God. Very important to remember that word. He saw God. He saw God. What does it mean he saw God? What does it mean he saw? He saw, I see it. What does it mean he saw God? His soul saw God. And when you see God, you can't deny its existence. And that makes an effect on the person, that the person is going to believe something. Right? When the first plane fly? In the 1905? 1903? 1903, right? In 1903, if you saw a plane fly, you told someone, I believe planes could fly. They told you you're crazy. You said, I might be crazy, but I saw it. Right? This comes from where I saw something, it's true. It can't be changed. This is called mazlai chazel. It doesn't affect you. You don't understand. It doesn't change who you are. It doesn't make you do anything. You can be a thief, stealing, going against God's will, and at the same time talking to God, please help me. Why? Because you know it's true, but it has no effect on you. Then there's another type of belief. And that emunah comes from the fact that you are a piece of God. Your soul is a part of God. That is a much, much stronger belief. That is an emunah, that is a belief in God. That is just like you believe your hands could function. You believe that you have a hand. You believe you have a feet. How do you know you have a foot? You saw it. You didn't have to see it to know. It's you. It's who you are. And when it's who you are, it is. And that belief in God is a much, much more powerful belief in God. It's a fact. It is what it is. It's not. It's belief because you don't. It's belief because you don't actually know God. But it's a reality to you because it's who you are. It says the Rebbe in the Mamer like this. That it says in the Zohar that in every single generation, there's a spashtusa, the Moshe, b'chol dara v'dara. In every single generation, there's a Moses. The Talmud says, Mordechai b'doirei, ke Moshe b'doirei. Mordechai, in the time of the story of going out of the side of the story of Purim, and Moses, at the time of the Jewish people going out of Egypt, are exactly the same. That's what it says in the Gemara. That's what it says in the Zohar. It says the Rebbe, the Zohar uses the word to describe Moshe that he was a rayim mehemna. He was what? A rayim mehemna. It's Aramaic. It's not Hebrew. In Hebrew, you'd say he's a roya nemon.
Yeah.
He's a faithful shepherd. What does it mean he's a faithful shepherd? So the simple, very, very simple meaning is that just like a shepherd shepherds his flock faithfully and with diligently, Moses was careful about every single sheep. So too, Moses shepherded his flock. He shepherded the flock of the Jewish people. Comes the Mamer, and the Mamer says it's not what it means. The Zohar says it's not what it means at all. You know what it means? It means he shepherded their belief. He fed their belief. And here, Rebbe introduces us to the first and most important job. The first and most important job that Moses, at the time of going out of Egypt, Mordechai, in the time of the story of Purim, and our Rebbe all have. Their most important job is to give and to shepherd and to feed our belief. What does that mean? That means to take away from us and to feed, not take away, but to feed and to take the belief that we have in God because it is who we are, and to feed it to our belief that we have because we saw God. In other words, to nourish our belief that it should become stronger. How? Not by coming to you and telling you I want you to believe in God. No, it's not what they do. They do something which we may never ever see. What is that? They take these two belief systems that we have and they bring them together. We are not, for the most part, we are not in tune with our essence of our soul, our connection to God, because we are part of Him. Our belief system comes from the fact that our soul saw God. That's what feeds us. That's what feeds us to go and to do things. And the job of Moses is to come, and the job of a Rebbe is to come and to feed that and say it's not just because you saw, but it's because who you are. Now, I don't know what that job looks like because I'm not a Rebbe. I never did it, and I will never know what it is.
Maybe one day.
Well, no. These are things you're born. You don't become. So I will never know what it is, right? But it's some sort of spiritual service. And I'll tell you a beautiful story that brings out this idea. I heard the story, like I said, I was listening to Rabbi Paltil's class, and he said the story. He said it with a name, but of course, my memory with names is at zero, so I don't remember who it was. I just remember it was a college campus in America, and this was a Chabad rabbi showed up there, and he opened up a little place for students to come, to hang out, and to learn, and to eat, and whatever. And after like 2 years, they noticed that every single person whoever walked into those doors was 100 times more religious than they were on the day they walked in. And they're trying to figure out why. What was he doing? What was his trip? Finally, one guy came to him and said, "Can I ask you a question? Do you send our names to the Rebbe? Like write a list of who came?" He says, "Of course. Every single time I have an occasion, an event here, I take all the names of all the people and I write it down. And I send it to the Rebbe." And they said, so that means that you connected every single one of us to our shepherd. And what was his job? His job is to take that belief that we have, which is because we saw God, which, just because we have it, we could still be the thief who stands at the door as he's about to steal and pray to God, and to make it a much stronger, make it a much more real belief system by bringing the essence of the soul into it, bringing back the fact that is who you are. Again, whatever that means, however he does it, we don't understand. And so therefore, their belief system was much stronger the day that 2 years later than it was the day that they started. So this is the first job of a Rebbe, and it never changes. It doesn't matter what's going on in the world around him. It doesn't matter what is happening. A Rebbe's job is to take our belief system and to strengthen it by making it stronger by combining these two things. So now, that is job number one of a Rebbe. And for that, it doesn't matter what's going on in the world around him, it always looks the same. But then, the Rebbe has another job. And the second job is really, really dependent on what's going on around him. And in the Mamer, he discusses 3 different rebbes. I'm going to try to give you. I'm going to be honest that with parts of it I struggle to understand exactly what it means because it's really, really deep. And maybe you'll help me understand it. But we're going to try. There's 3 rebbes, and then there's probably a million more. But in the Mamer, he discusses 3 different eras, and therefore, while the first job of the Rebbe to connect the essence of the soul, the etzem haneshama, which is the fact that it's a piece of God, and therefore it has a belief in God because it is God, together with the second part of the soul, which is the mazlayu, the mazel of the soul, or in some places in Chassidus it calls it the chaya of the neshama, where it's described, whatever, it saw God and therefore believes in God. That's the primary job of the Rebbe. The Rebbe has a second job. And that second job is going to depend on what is going on in the world around you. So let's start with Moshe Rabbeinu, says the Rebbe. Let's start with Moses, right? The verse in the pasuk is V'ata Tetzave b'nei Yisrael. It's talking to Moses, right? So the Rebbe says, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's job? What was Moshe Rabbeinu's job? So he had what was his secondary job? In other words, what was the practical side? What was the practical side of combining these two parts of the soul, these 2 belief systems? What did it look like on the ground? So the Rebbe says, Moshe Rabbeinu, who was he dealing with? A bunch of Jews who, let's just go through their life in overcap. They suffered, and then all of a sudden, they saw God give 10 plagues to the Egyptians. But that was nothing. That was nothing compared to what they saw next. You know what they saw next? They saw at midnight, God comes down, and there's a revelation of godless, like we say in the Haggadah. Ani v'lo malach, I am not an angel. Ani hu v'lo yacher, I, God himself, came down and revealed himself in a way that killed the firstborn of every single Egyptian. It was a revelation of godliness. It wasn't someone coming with an M16. It was a revelation of godliness, and that the Jewish people saw and experienced. But that was nothing compared to what they saw a week later. You know what they saw a week later? A week later they came to the Red Sea, and God showed them. In the Kabbalah it explains, if you would learn Kabbalah, which I don't, but if you learn Kabbalah you would understand the splitting of the sea was a revelation of godliness, that they saw the deepest secrets that were there. That's what it only opened up the ocean, and you saw the bottom of the ocean, you saw the deepest secrets. It was a revelation of godliness, mind-blowing. But that was nothing compared to what they had a couple weeks later. They stood at the foot of Mount Sinai, and God himself came down and spoke to them. These were Jews that the Talmud calls them Dor Deo. They did not believe in God. They knew. They had understanding of godliness that's far beyond what we could comprehend. What's Moses going to do for them? So I'm going to use the words the way Rabbi Patil said it, because I thought it was so beautiful. And it spoke to my heart. And he says, Moshe Rabbeinu had a farbrengen, just like we're having over here. They sat down, all the Jewish people, and Moshe Rabbeinu farbrengen. And this is what he would sound like. He would say, Jews, listen to me. Why do you believe in God? Because you saw him. And what's going to happen when you leave the desert? Are you still going to believe in God? When you have to go to business and you have to go work for a living, you're not going to be sitting surrounded by clouds. You're not going to be living and experiencing a heaven, manna from heaven here on earth. Are you still going to be able to believe in God? Or is the God that you believe in only because you're experiencing what you're experiencing? And this is what Moses was doing. He was trying to bring out to them that they believe in God because they saw God, but what's about believing in God because it's just true? And Moses sat for 40 years in the desert with 600,000 men. And this is what he spoke to them about every day and every night. You know the rabbi, like when every rabbi, they get, I shouldn't say every rabbi, most rabbis, they get these hiccups. All of a sudden they see something interesting, and then for like the next 3 months, every time you speak to them, they somehow mix in whatever excited them 3 months ago, they mix it into the conversation. You're like, okay, we heard about it already, right? Yeah. Right? Moses for 40 years spoke about one topic. And that was, guys, what's going to happen when we leave the desert? Are you able to believe in God or not able to believe in God? Are you able to believe in God because you're part of Him? Or is our belief in God only because Mazlayu Chazi, we saw godliness? And just for the record, the Jewish people who saw God did not make it into the land of Israel. Not a single one of them.
What about Erev Rav?
The Erev Rav, that's a whole different story. Okay. Says the Rebbe, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's job? Moshe Rabbeinu's job was one simple thing. Encourage the Jewish people to recognize that they have to believe in God. Not just because they saw it, but also intellectually and emotionally, and to internalize it. Try to make it who you are. Not just I believe in God because I had these experiences, but believe in God because this is who I am. This is what I understand. It's because what I feel. It's because what I want to be. This is what Moses spent his entire 40 years in the desert. And that is Rebbe number one.
First.
Moshe.
Yeah,
the first type. And remember, like I said, there's probably millions more types, but the Rebbe focuses on three. Moshe, we're talking about Purim, so Mordechai, and then he's going to talk about, we'll see. The Talmud says, two very interesting and strange things. Talmud says that when the Jewish people came to Mount Sinai, God lifted up Mount Sinai, held it over their head, it hovered over their head, and said to them, you can accept my Torah? Good. And if not, I'm going to bury you right here, under the mountain. And the Jewish people said, Nasav and Nishma, we're going to do whatever you say. God said, phew, and put the mountain back down where it belonged. That's what the Talmud says. The verse says, in the Haggadah, in the Megillah, the verse says, Kimu v'kiblu hayuhudim es asher chelu lasis. The Jewish people fulfilled and they accepted. Says the Talmud, I don't understand. Before you do it, before you fulfill the contract, you accept the contract. Kimu means they fill the contract. Kiblu means they accepted the contract. The verse should say, Kiblu v'kimu. They accepted the contract and they fulfilled the contract. But what does the verse say? They fulfilled the contract and they accepted the contract. It mixes it up. Says the Talmud, Kimu, they fulfilled, Ma'asher kiblu kfar, that which they already accepted. Says the Talmud, what does that mean? That during the time when God came to them and He told them, accept the Torah, what did He do? He took a mountain and held it over their head. So what kind of choice is that? What kind of choice is it that you have? I tell you, either do this, or I'm going to kill you. Who's not going to do it? Now, in Chassidus it explains, and I want to clarify, God didn't threaten to kill anybody. God didn't actually lift up a mountain and hold it over their head. Chassidus it explains what it means is that God, like I said before, He showed Himself to them. Could you imagine, we have little kids here, so I'm going to use this example. You imagine dad comes to you with a PS5 or an Xbox and says, hey, if you listen to your teacher, here's the Xbox, I'm going to give it to you. Who's not going to listen to the teacher for a week? Of course you're going to listen. If God comes to Himself and says, hey, here I am, you want me? Who could say no? Who could say no? God reveals Himself to you. You can't say no. You don't say no. So it's not that He threatened, not that He forced them in that way. He forced them by showing them the beauty and showing them who He is. But the reality is, He forced them. It was not free choice. It was not real choice.
Not threatening, but He did force
by showing them the prize, how good the prize is.
Yeah.
But it was still not free choice. So what would happen if you came to a Jew 300 years later and you said to him and said, excuse me, why are you not keeping the Torah? He's going to tell you, you know why? Because I never really wanted it. So why did you accept it? You threatened me with my life. Or you forced me by showing me how good it was. Had I known what life was really going to be like, had I not seen God, I would have never taken it. The Talmud says, Medo Rabo L'Raisa. That's what the Talmud says. Comes the Jewish people by the story of Purim. And the Gemara says that came Haman. And because Purim's coming up, so I'll tell you something that I probably knew and never thought about. And it goes like this. Does anybody know what day Haman and Achashverosh decided to kill the Jewish people? It was on the 13th day of the month of Nisan. How much later was Haman killed? How long did it take from when Haman's decree came out to kill all the Jews until Haman died? 72 hours. Within 72 hours, Haman was dead. Now the decree itself was, like Natan said, was 11 months later when the actual war is going to happen. But you know, Haman had a lot of decrees. Haman didn't just decree that we're going to kill all the Jews. The Medrash tells us that Haman made another decree. If you're going to learn Torah, dead on the spot. And Haman wasn't looking to kill every Jew. You know who Haman was looking to kill? Every Jew who believed in God. Mm-hmm. So what did you have to do to save yourself?
To stop
believing in God. How many Jews stopped believing in God? Because remember, even though Haman was dead, the decree was still standing. How many Jews stopped believing in God? Does anybody want to take a guess? Talmud says, very good, the Talmud says, not one Jew thought for even 1 second, for an entire year, not one Jew thought for even 1 second, for an entire year, that maybe we should stop believing in God. Not for, well, at the end of 11 months, was the whole decree was over. The war happened 11 months later. So for 11 months, from the time of the decree, until the story of Purim 11 months later, it says the Talmud, not one Jew thought for even 1 second that maybe I should give it up. So now, ask a question. When it came to the story of Mount Sinai, what was the force? The force was, if you accept it, good. If not, no good. Over here, what's the force? If you don't accept it, good. If you do accept it, bad. Right? So that means that after the story of Purim, if I come to you and I tell you, why did you not go against the Torah? You say, I was forced to keep the Torah. No, you weren't forced to keep the Torah. The story of Purim, you were begged not to keep the Torah. You were offered only good things if you don't keep the Torah. And you risked your life to keep the Torah. You were ready to die to keep the Torah. Says the Talmud, Kimu, they finally fulfilled that which they accepted by Mount Sinai. They finally fulfilled it. They finally showed that they truly meant to accept the Torah, and it wasn't just because they were forced. Says the Rebbe and the Mamer. So what was Mordechai doing? What was Mordechai doing for an entire 11 months? He was also Farbrengen with the Jews. But you know what his Farbrengen sounded like? His Farbrengen sounded like this. Jews, don't worry. Be ready to die for God. Because God loves us and we have to risk our lives. And even if it means we're going to die, we're going to do what God wants from us. And for a year, for 11 months, this is what Mordechai was screaming. It was like on a tape. It was a recording. It was the same thing over and over.
He was mourning.
What?
He was mourning.
He mourned for 3 days. But at the end of the 3rd day, Haman was dead. There was no more mourning. He was ready to introduce Achashverosh. He was already the king. He was ready the second to the king after 72 hours. There was no mourning anymore. He mourned for 3 days. Then he had a year. He had 11 months. He had to deal with Jewish people whose lives were still at risk. Remember, Achashverosh never rescinded his decree to kill the Jewish people. In fact, 75,000 people came out to battle. Right? And there was another downside during Mordechai's time. There was one time in history, one single time in history, the Jewish people were at the risk of being annihilated. One time. And that was during the story of Purim. The Gemara says, Tzitkes Pizreine Yisrael, and I botched up that verse, but something like that. The Mamer said, Tzedakah asa Kadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. God did a great favor for the Jews. He spread us out. We're all over the place. You can't wipe us out. You know why you can't wipe us out? If you kill all the Jews in Russia, there's still Jews in America. If you kill all the Jews in America, there's still Jews in... And not only that, there's a war going on in Israel. A bunch of Americans are sending support. Right? We're all here to help each other. Except when? Achashverosh was in time of Achashverosh. Who Achashverosh? He was Achashverosh. Asher, what was he? Was a king. Kush. Says the Gemara, he was Melech B'Kippa. He was the only king in the world. There was no nation that was not below him. Which means that when Achashverosh gives out a decree, annihilate the Jewish people, who's going to come there to save them? Nobody. Because there's no place that's not under his rulership. Which means that there was one time in Jewish history when there was a man who had A, the ability, and B, tried to kill every single solitary Jew. What did the Jewish people do? They came Sunday morning to shul, and Mordechai was standing there, and he said, bring out the schnapps, bring out the salotka, Chevra Yidin, don't risk your life for anything. And they all said l'chaim. Yeah, it was definitely the salotka. And you know what happened on Monday morning? They came to shul again. And Mordechai said, bring out the schnapps. And every single day, there was not a day that went by that Mordechai did not have to repeat this message. Why? Because it does not make sense. It is impossible to do. What did Mordechai tell them? Mordechai told them, in very simple words, Mordechai told them, our connection to God is not because you saw him. It's not because you understand who he is. It's not because you have an emotional connection to him. Our connection to God is because that is who we are. Remember, what is Moshe Rabbeinu, what is Moses' primary job? To connect these two parts, our two belief systems. Our belief system in God because we saw him, and our belief system in God because it's who we are, and to bring them together. In Mordechai's lifetime, what did that mean? That meant, remember, this is who we are, even if we have to die. And this is what he preached to them day and day and day out, every single day, 3 times a day. Because that was the only thing that was going to help them survive. The moment they started thinking about it, you know what he told them? Put your intelligence aside. The moment they started having feelings about that, they said, put your feelings aside. Because our intellect and our emotions and our feelings would disrupt and destroy this ability to be able to risk our lives, to give up our lives for God. Says the Rebbe, there's two, the Rebbe says, in each one of these ways of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, the way he was in his generation, and Moses, the way he was in Mordechai, there's a deficiency. What's the deficiency in each one of them? The deficiency by Moses is that we don't actually know what's going to happen if they leave. We don't actually know if they're ever in tune with who they really are, because they were never tested. Says the Rebbe, by Mordechai, we know what's going to happen if they're tested. You know how we know? Because they were tested. But the Rebbe is a deficiency. You know what the deficiency is? We don't know what's going to happen when they're not being tested. Are they able to have that belief in God when they're not being pressured by the fact that someone wants to kill them? And then the Rebbe does something that only our Rebbe ever does. So just appreciate what's about to happen. The Rebbe says, in the Mamer that the previous Rebbe said in 1927, this is the highlight of the Mamer. This is the epitome of the Mamer. This is where the Mamer comes. Says the Rebbe, what was happening in 1927? Purim 1927. The previous Rebbe is sitting in his shul, and there's people from the Enkeved there. And hundreds and thousands of Chassidim are being arrested and killed for what? For the purpose of spreading Judaism. And what does the Rebbe say? But this is our mission in life. Our connection to God is stronger than this. The Rebbe says, you know who the Mordechai was? Previous Rebbe. He was the Mordechai. He is the Mordechai. And Mordechai is doing the Rebbe, it's exactly like Mordechai. They're being threatened by a Haman, and they're fighting it with everything they have. And what are they doing? They're putting their intellect on the side, they're putting their emotions on the side, they're putting everything goes to the wayside. And what are you left with? I am a part of God, and push forward. Says the Rebbe, there's only one problem. Only one problem with this whole thing. And that is that the verse, Kimu v'kiblu, that they accepted that which they started, is written in the story after the miracle. Which means that the ultimate accepting that because we want to is not because we're forced because someone is threatening with our lives, but the ultimate accepting this is because we have something else that's pushing us to accept it. And it's not the threat of the goy. It's not the threat of the Enkevedet. It's not the threat of Haman. It's not the threat, says the Rebbe. There is a third type of Rebbe. Of course, the Rebbe is not going to say that it's himself, but we're sitting over here and we'll try to understand if this is exactly the situation that the Rebbe describes over here, if this is not the situation that we are living here in 2024, and in 1950, and in 1960, and in 1970, and every year that the Rebbe was our Rebbe. The Rebbe first says, to bring out that it's not the ultimate, the Rebbe says that we could see on many Jews who were under communism, and they risked their lives, and then they came to America, and they didn't risk their life so much anymore. So this idea, says the Rebbe, that when you're forced to do it, makes it real, is only when you're being forced. Before I say the next part, I want to say that this part is...
Can you actually quote the maimor?
You want me to quote parts of the Mamer?
Yeah, of course.
I will try. I'm not going to lie, it kind of goes back and forth, and I think part of the reason that I never appreciated the Mamer the way I did this week was because...
No, in Yiddish actually, or it's on Hebrew.
No, it's Hebrew, but the reason I never appreciated Mamer is because it's really hard to dissect that he's doing this in the Mamer, because it's kind of all mixed together, and you have to he goes back when he's teaching the Mamer and I'm listening to it, he's skipping back and forth to bring up different points. But yeah, I'll try to, this next part I'll try to do with words of the Mamer. But before I do that, I want to give a Meidar Rabbi L'Raisa. I want to excuse myself to say that the next part is I'm simplifying it, not because of you, but because of myself. There's parts over here that are way beyond my comprehension, and I spent time trying to figure out what exactly it means, and I don't know. I don't know exactly what it means. So I'm going to try my best to explain, to give it to you.
Thank you.
I'm going to try my best to give it to you, but if you don't understand it, it's not the fault of the Mamer, it's the fault of me that I also don't understand it 100%, and so I can only explain it to you as best as I could. That is going to put forth that there are two reasons that a person should feel crushed. And the Rebbe says like this: the same is true regarding being crushed. That there's one reason, like we said before, when Jewish people find themselves in a situation of being crushed. Why? Because there are decrees regarding fulfilling Torah mitzvahs. Through this, they come to the essence of their soul. Through the fact that they're ready to risk their lives, they come in tune with the fact that they're part of God. Then the Rebbe says, but then there's a time that Yisrael, Jewish people are found, it's good. And what does good mean, says the Rebbe? There's no bread line. There's no Haman telling you that you're going to get killed. There's no Enkivedes saying that you have to work 7 days a week. You can work 5 days a week. You can make a decent living. You have everything you want. You have a beautiful apartment. You drive a nice car. You have a computer. You have a phone. You have a laptop. You have whatever you want. You have good schools. And the beach. You can go swimming in the Black Sea every morning if you want. Nobody's going to stop you. You have whatever you want. You could buy a Torah in every language. You could listen to a class 6 days a week. You could listen to the audio. There's enough audio for you to learn a whole day. You never have to stop learning Torah. And you have enough money to do this. So what's your kasis? What's your struggle? What's your hardship? Ella says There's one thing that bothers you, and that is you're in exile.
Yeah.
You're not in the right place. A Jew belongs with Hashem and the temple, the Beis Hamikdash. The Rebbe quotes the Gemara, that the Gemara says that it's true that the decree was taken away, but Akati Avde Achashverosh Anan, says the Gemara. The Gemara says we're still Achashverosh's slaves. What's bothering the Jew? What's bothering the Jew is not that someone's forcing him not to do Torah mitzvahs. That's not bothering him, because he doesn't have that. What's bothering him is that he's not where he belongs. What are his struggles? His struggles are, and I don't mean to offend anybody, his struggles are that he wants to be in American culture. He's in Galus. He's in exile. Culture is good. My son had today a test, OT Shiva next year. So the principal's testing him. And he asks him a question, and he says to him, what are they doing? They're playing baseball? And he throws in, you got to rub it into him. He says, I know a lot of boys in Miami that like going to baseball games. It's not so accepted, but the Chabad boys, they don't go to baseball games. But in Miami, the Chabad boys go to baseball games. He throws it in there, right? It's his culture. It's his life. He's in exile. Makes him feel good. He's enjoying it. He wants to be part of what everybody else does. He wants to go to a movie theater. He wants to play baseball. He wants to have an Xbox. He wants to go to the beach. Is that where a Jew belongs? Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't know. I'm not here to judge. But that's what his situation is, says the Rebbe. But the Jew is broken. Why is he broken? What's the true desire of a Jew? A Jew wants Mashiach. Why does a Jew want Mashiach? For a simple reason. The definition of the coming of Mashiach is that godliness is going to be revealed. Comes a Jew. There's a beautiful story about a holy man in Jerusalem. That one day there was a crazy guy, and he bought himself a really good chauffeur, and he figured out where the best place to stand. Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. Harim Savula says the pasuk is surrounded by mountains. And the guy figured out where's the best place to get good acoustics. And he went and blew the shofar on a mountain. Blew the shofar on a mountain somewhere. And the acoustics made it great that in Jerusalem it sounded like the shofar of Mashiach. So someone came running into I think it was the Rabbi 11, the tzaddik was called the tzaddik of Yerushalayim. The Maggid of Yerushalayim came running to him and said, Mashiach's here! Mashiach's here! So he went running to the window, he opened the window, and he smelled outside, and he said, Mashiach's not here. So they asked him, I understand, why do you have to smell outside that Mashiach's not here? So he answered, in my room, Mashiach's already here. He lived in such a place of holiness that Mashiach was in his personal life. It was as if Mashiach. Comes the Rebbe over here, and the Rebbe argues that it's not possible. The Rebbe argues over here it's not possible. Right after Passover of 1991, and similarly also happened in I believe it was Purim of 1984. I believe Purim 1984 or 1986. Very similar. The Rebbe spoke. And the Rebbe said that how could it be that there are Jews, that we can't get together three Jews who really, really want Mashiach. And the Rebbe said, if there would be, the Rebbe said, 10 or 3 Jews who really want Mashiach would come. What do you mean? Why if there are 3 people who want Mashiach would come? There's 6, 10, 12, 20 million Jews. 3 people want Mashiach's going to have to come. Like, what do 3 people have to do with anything? That's like not even... That's not even a rounding error. That's like a clerical error. I mean, that's like a typo. Yeah. That's not even a typo, right? The answer is very simple. When we talk about revelation of God, when we talk about the fact that Mashiach, definition of Mashiach, coming of Mashiach is that God is revealed everywhere. If God is not revealed everywhere, then God is not revealed anywhere. Now, that's not 100% true, so don't quote me on it, because I'll deny that I said it. But if just in concept, it's true. The real revelation of godliness is something which is everything. It's not in some places. So comes a Jew, and the Jew says, "Listen, I have everything. I sit I go to work 8 hours a day, and during work, every person who walks into my office, if it's a Jewish guy, the first thing I do to him is I say, listen, before we sit down to do business, we got to do a mitzvah. Let's put tefillin. You didn't put tefillin today. If you did get tefillin, we give charity together. We say, if it's a non-Jewish guy, I say to him, there's the 7 commandments of God told us, so we got to keep every person matter. I do everything. And then I come home, and I spend 6 hours with my wife and kids. And then before I go to bed, I spend 3 hours learning Torah. And then I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning. I sleep only 2 hours a day. By me, God is everything. Life is good. It's Mashiach. Says the Rebbe, no. Says the Rebbe, no. You're entirely wrong. It's not real revelation of godliness. This guy has to be broken by himself. Why does he have to be broken? Because if he really had revelation of godliness, real godliness by revealed fashion, then by Chezky and by Vladimir and by every other person, and I choose picking on you because you pick on me, because you pick on me.
My Hebrew name, that's why you do it.
Velvel.
Zev.
Not because you pick on me, I pick on you.
No.
So says the Rebbe, if it's not revealed by the other person, then it's not really revealed by me. And for that he's broken. Why is he broken? Let's try to understand why is he broken, says the Rebbe. Says the Rebbe, the reason he's broken is because there's only one reason to be broken. Because at that moment he's realizing and he's appreciating that his essence of his soul, which is his connection to godliness, that is what's concealed. That is what's not revealed. Because if his essence of his soul, if his connection to godliness, the fact that he's one with God will be revealed, then he would have it by everybody. That revelation of godliness would be revealed by everybody. And for that he's broken. Says the Rebbe, this, that the desire of every single Jew is that there should be the ultimate revelation of godliness, because of the essence of our soul, is because our connection to God is who we are. So now I ask you, what is the Rebbe's job of this generation? What is the Rebbe's job of a generation who has Harchava B'Gashmis? They have everything they want physically. They have Harchava B'Ruchnis. They have everything they want spiritually. What's his job? What's he going to be telling you every single day? What's he going to sit down by the Farbrengen? Moses sat down by the Farbrengen, and what did he say? Are you going to be Jewish after you come out of the cloud? Mordechai sat down by the Farbrengen, and he said what? He said, we have to give our lives up. What's the Rebbe? Who is the Rebbe of a generation who has everything they need physically, emotionally, spiritually? They have everything they need and want.
Mashiach.
What's he going to be screaming? Chavre, do you want Mashiach? Do you want the ultimate revelation of godliness? And if not, how could you live? Before I get into the Farbrengen part of it, I want to just do one more intellectual part. And I have to be honest that this is the part that I have the hardest time understanding. So I'm going to try. But like I said before, if it doesn't 100% make sense, please forgive the Mamer and blame it on the teacher. The Rebbe says something which is beyond, it is a...
Makes no logical sense.
It makes logical sense, but not to me so much, because it's a chidush nifla. It's an innovation which is beyond comprehension.
Miracle.
It's beyond comprehension. It's an innovation of understanding of a concept which is beyond deep. Normally, the way we understand things is as follows: there is an expression of everything. Everything expresses itself. Everything expresses itself. It doesn't matter what. Everything expresses itself. And then everything has what it is, beyond its expression. And in the terms of Chassidus, using the words of the Mamer, it would be, there's Giluyim, there's the expressions, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, and then there's Atzmius, there is the thing itself. Comes the Rebbe, and the Rebbe says something which is the first, I don't think it says anywhere else in the whole Chassidus, and that is that in Atzmius, in essence, there's also two expressions. There's also two parts. And that is as follows. And I'm going to try, and if it's hard, just just argue with me, because maybe if we argue and discuss it, maybe we'll both understand it better at the end. And it goes like this. There is the essence of the thing itself. There is who it is, but who it is not expressible. It cannot be expressed. And then there is who it is, that it's so much who it is, that in every single expression you see it. I don't have any other words to explain it.
Can you repeat that?
I'm
Can you repeat that, please?
No. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read the Hebrew of the Mamer, and I'm going to hope that it's better than my explanation. Shagan etzem haneshama, the essence of the soul, who mugdar begeder. It has a definition. It has a defined definition. And what is its definition? Its definition is that it's l'mayla mitzira keches. Its definition is it's defined by the fact that it's undefinable. But then there's the essence of the soul, which is hapshitus ta neshama v'atzir v'akeches l'shem kol echad. It's so undefinable that it's the definition of everything. It's the essence of everything that's there, which is much. It's so undefinable that it can be defined by everything. It's again, I am not gonna lie. I struggled for hours trying to understand what this means, and I don't really appreciate it. I don't think I appreciate it properly. But the point is
it's defined by its inability to be defined.
That's the lower level, and the higher level is that it's so undefined that it's defined by everything.
Say it again, please.
It's so undefined, it has so no definition that every part of it can be defined. And let me explain to you why it makes a difference. Let me you see, it's the result of this explanation, the result of the difference I understand. I could explain to you the result of the difference, but I can't explain to you the difference itself. And this is what the result of the difference is. Something that's undefined, and that's its definition, ultimately, when it comes down into the person's life, the moment you take it away from him, it didn't really affect his intellect. When the Jewish people were at the story of Haman, the Jewish people were under communist Russia, and their lives were consumed by the fact that we are connected to God. It was an extremely deep relationship with God, because that's who I am. But the moment you took it away from them, their intellect and their emotions took over, and they lost it. Why? Because their intimate relationship with God was an undefined relationship. And what the Rebbe is trying to explain to us over here is that there is such an intimate relationship with God that I recognize, understand, and appreciate. That the only thing I really want is that there should be revealed godliness. My real connection to God is that I should be part of God, is not just something which I have because it's my definition, because of who I am, but it's because that's what I understand, that's what I need to have, and it's because that's what I feel I need to have. And where does that come from? Because I have a desire to be part of the revelation of godliness. My desire for the revealed godliness in the world, the coming of Mashiach. And so what does this Rebbe sit and verbring? Chevre, Jewish people want the Mashiach.